Everything's on Fire, Wednesday, March 12, 2014, 7:16 a.m. I'm out in the fresh morning air. A light breeze is blowing in from the north, heralding warmth. Although in Melbourne, this doesn't really mean much. It is a city renowned for having 4 seasons in one day. I've taken the bins out, now full of broken mirror, vases, and ceramics, and I'm stretching in the golden sunlight that sweeps down the length of my street in long, lazy strokes. I'm back to right way round, and it'll take a bit of getting used to. At the same time, it feels good, familiar. I hear a noise in my neighbour's yard and see Mrs. Chu in a silk bathrobe dragging her bins onto the verge as well. "Mr. Picklejig, are you okay? I was so worried, Law." "Oh, I'm fine, Mrs. Chu. As you can see, couldn't be better." "That man, he came to fight you, La?" "Yes, he did." "I thought maybe he hit you. I can see your eye is a little bit swollen. Is it?" "No, Mrs. Chu, that's old. I fell at basketball last week." "No, he tried to hit me, but he missed. All he managed to do was smash my mirror, and a few other things." "Ah, but you hit him." "I did." "I thought so. I saw him leaving. He had a bloody mouth. He was holding it with his hand. You know Kung Fu?" "Yes, I know Kung Fu." I make some chopping motions in the air. "Very good, Chinese Kung Fu. That man was very angry." "Yes, jealous ex-boyfriend, I'm afraid." I indicate towards the house. "Ah, your girlfriend. She is very beautiful." "Thank you, Mrs. Chu. I agree." "What is her name?" "Jing Yi." "Beautiful name for beautiful girl. No wonder the other man is jealous." "He's more than jealous, I'm afraid. He's obsessed. He can't accept that she's moved on. I think he really wanted to hurt me." "But you taught him a lesson, is it?" "That I did." "So how come you didn't open the door? I almost called the police. I thought maybe something had happened to you, Law." "I locked it so the man wouldn't be able to come back in. After that I was cleaning up, taking broken glass out to the back. Then I was vacuuming. Imagine my surprise when Jing Yi tapped me on the shoulder." "I'm so happy everything is okay. You got me worried. My husband, he's back in Malaysia again, so I'm all by myself. I was very frightened." "And with good reason, Mrs. Chu. That man is violent. He's very bad. We will have to be on guard." At this comment, Mrs. Chu nods in agreement. "I got his number plates." "Excellent. If you see his car again, call the police." "I will. Do you think he will come back?" "I don't think so. I hope not. But you'll keep an eye out for me, Mrs. Chu, won't you?" "Of course." "Excellent. I have your mobile number, and you have mine. We can call each other if we see anything." "Okay." I've left Justine sleeping in the spare room. When I last checked, she was asleep, although the frown was etched twice as deeply into her forehead. I expect last night was far too much to absorb, especially after what seems to have happened to her before that. I have yet to get any details, and I'm not sure I want them. Justine took in everything well enough, all things considered. She didn't say much. She nodded and did as Frank instructed. I think she was in shock, the clinical kind. I guess that's hardly surprising. It was only later that she crashed. No doubt when she wakes up she'll wonder if it was all a dream. When I came bounding up the stairs of the studio, I really didn't know what to expect. I knew some time had passed, and as I reached for the laundry door handle, I knew I'd switched sides again. In other words, I knew I'd been reprinted. I just didn't know why. I was going to go with the flow and see where it took me. To say I was surprised by what I saw in the hallway would be an understatement. It had been thoroughly trashed. The giant mirror had been shattered into 1,000 dagger-like shards which littered the floor. The hallway stand with the vases had been overturned, and broken ceramic now rose above the glittering floor like jagged coral. I heard Justine calling, of course. I was surprised to see her on the floor in the living room, lying in what looked like a pool of semi-dried vomit, holding a person's head. My head. And it was all blue. I immediately knew it wasn't D1. The dead guy was dressed exactly as I was. My latest backup had been printed, probably by Frank. Something very bad had just happened. I ran up to make sure my former self was actually dead. I don't know what we would have done if he wasn't. As it happens, he was already starting to go cold. The skin didn't feel like a live person's skin when I felt for the pulse. Without blood supply, your brain basically starts dying after 6 minutes or so. This guy had been gone for much longer than that. He looked like he'd taken quite a beating, too. His nose had been broken, and possibly his left cheekbone, too. His mouth was a total mess, swollen beyond recognition, broken tooth enamel mixed with orangey vomit. I already had a pretty good idea who was behind this: Ian McRae. I looked down on my former self and wondered if he had managed to get at least one punch in. The knuckles of his left hand told me he had. I could see the middle and index knuckles badly mangled, the kind of mangling I've seen in bar fights, where fist meets tooth. Looking at him, I wondered what had happened. Did Ian kill him? I doubted it. He had time to vomit, probably from concussion. My best guess was that he had choked, then this had set off sudden cardiac death, just as Clinton, the nurse practitioner, had warned me. I said something like this to Justine, but she merely looked at me in a state of shock. Frank's voice started blaring out on the phone speaker, and after that we both went into a kind of action mode. Frank instructed us, or rather me initially, to move the coffee table to one side. That left my former self lying on the rug. I had to roll the body up tightly, so that there was roughly equal room at both top and bottom. Then I had to put heavy bin liners over both ends and tape them up. After that, I had to sweep a quick path through the debris using the big broom from the garage. Then came the hard part, convincing a shocked and shaking Justine to help me pick up the body, now wrapped in a rug and rubbish bags, and carry it down to the studio. Frank insisted that Justine should don a rain jacket and gloves to minimize DNA contact with the underside of the rug, I suspect. It probably took 20 minutes or so to persuade her to do just this one thing. Initially, she just sat on the now rugless, polished concrete floor and shook her head. Once I got her going, it took another 20 minutes to carry the body down to the studio, all in fits and starts. By the time we got to the stairs, Justine's phone battery was dead, so Frank was barking his instructions over the Skype connection. He was adamant that we minimize contact between the rug and the floor or the walls of the corridor. Of course, this was practically impossible, and Justine must have dropped poor former Dan at least half a dozen times. Luckily, she had the legs. I didn't know I was that heavy. Once we got him into the recording booth, Justine hobbled back to the stairs, where she sat cupping her chin with her hands, wearing the 1,000-yard stare. Meanwhile, I manhandled the body into the center of the recording booth, sweating profusely from every pore. Justine said nothing, while I pressed record and null. Only once I'd finished did she turn and ask me, "Why haven't we called the police yet? We can't keep the body here, it will start to smell." Of course I replied with, "What body?" It took some considerable coaxing from both Frank and me to get her to look into the recording booth, so as to verify that the body was, in fact, gone. "Oh, for God's sake! What have you done with it?" was her only response. "Erased it," I said. "However, it is backed up on the computer," added Frank via the Skype connection. "You guys are insane. You know that? You're going to get into serious trouble." "Why?" "Section 34B of the Crimes Act 1958. Interfering with a corpse," she said absently, sitting back down on the stairs. "But there is no corpse." "Only because you've hidden it." "No, it's gone, completely." "If it's under the house somewhere, it'll be found eventually." "Justine, the corpse has been erased," shouted Frank. "Tell her, Dan." "I've been trying to explain it, Juss. There isn't a trapdoor or anything. Frank has a kind of teleportation device here. It's in that booth. Think Star Trek. It's like their transporter room." "I never watched Star Trek." "Okay, 3D printing then. I know it's hard to believe, but the other Dan just doesn't exist anymore. I'm a backup copy that has been printed using a 3D printer. The former one has been erased, like you'd erase a computer file. You're all back to front, you know that? Your hair part's on the wrong side again. Her eyes seemed to glaze over as she made this observation. That's what happens when you make a copy, for some reason. I need to go home. None of this is making any sense. I need to lie down. Justine made a weary effort to get to her feet. It was only then that I noticed the stain on her pants, a dark patch extending from her crotch around to the back. Justine, you're bleeding. Did you cut yourself? She turned to me as I asked this and just said matter-of-factly, No, that was from before. Ian came over. I should have changed my pad. Silly me. I was in a rush. I could pretty much fill in the rest. I glanced at Frank, and it was clear that he understood too. So I said goodbye and promised to call him in a couple of hours, after I'd attended to Justine. I took Justine upstairs, got her showered, and gave her one of Frank's pyjamas. She had brought over some spare underwear and a few toiletries on Monday night, and luckily hadn't remembered to take them home. This meant she at least had undies and a liner. Then I tucked her into the bedroom next to mine and kissed her on the forehead. She curled up in a ball, pulled the covers right up to her chin, and seemed to fall asleep before I'd left the room. After that I swept up the mess, throwing it into the big green bin along with the rain jacket and gloves we'd forced Justine to wear. Then I used bleach to wipe the floors and the walls, taking particular care, as per Frank's instructions, to make sure I cleaned everything approaching the laundry and hidden stairwell. I was sad to notice that 2 of the Waldemar Kolbusz originals had been wrecked. Ian must have thrown me into them repeatedly. I ended up tearing the canvases and frames apart and stuffing them all into the bin as well. It had gotten pretty full and heavy. Thankfully, the next day was bin day, although Frank said it wouldn't matter anyway. It was 1 a.m. or thereabouts when I finally got to call Frank. "You there?" "Yeah, buddy. Everything okay?" Got Justine showered and in bed. She's been out for a while. It looks like that Ian character has raped her." "I thought as much. I want to kill the bastard." "Don't worry. I've got an even better plan." "Oh, how so?" "I'll explain it later. For now, be aware that I have a plan and we've already started putting it into effect. Did you clean up?" "All done, just as you instructed." "Good. Give it a day or 2 and repeat the whole bleach thing. I don't want the studio being part of the crime scene. I couldn't give a rat's about the hallway. That's inevitable." "What crime scene?" "You'll see. In the meantime, I've got something more pressing to discuss. I'm going to tell you what I told your earlier, now deceased self. What the fuck were you thinking, you stupid moron?" "You mean making the extra copy?" "Exactly." "Sorry, Frank. I pretty much realized it was a dumb idea the moment I landed here. The guy still thinks it's great, though. He now wants me to—" I know. Erase yourself so that he can fly over on a jet and take over your life, blah, blah. Well, obviously that's not going to happen, is it?" "Sure, because my life here is toast. He'll have to stay in Perth." "Absolutely not. He's not staying anywhere. He's totally redundant. In fact, his very existence stuffs up everything." Frank, I hate to point out the obvious, but I'm the copy." "I couldn't give a flying fuck about that. Because you're fool enough to make 2 versions of yourself at the same time, I now have to pick one of you, don't I? You only need half a brain to figure out that I'm going to prefer the guy who's finally got it rather than the guy who doesn't. Some arbitrary calculus you've previously concocted to determine priority doesn't interest me in the slightest. No, the other guy will just have to be erased." "You're kidding. Sounds a bit harsh. I was going to tell him what happened. Give him a chance to divorce Kylie. Maybe find another job." "Oh, must I go through all this again? No. You can't do any of that." "Why not?" "Because, idiot, we can't have 2 of you running about at the same time. Trust me, inevitably we'll end up with problems. Serious ones. Consider just this. Having one false identity is hard enough, especially when you're trying to avoid detection by the authorities. Having 2 is next to impossible. 2 trails leading back to 2 separate studios, both linked by a network? Are you mad? But I was thinking, if I came to live with you. This is going to be a replay, isn't it? Why didn't I just record the last conversation? Oh, that's right. Because you hadn't yet told me that some murderous bastard was coming around to beat your brains in. And this all happened because? Any guesses? Because you were using the same tomfool logic you're trying on me now. Are you telling me I can't come and live with you? Of course you can. But first we have 2 discrete, critical issues to deal with. Ian McRae is one, and we'll get to that in due course. But the more pressing one is your alter ego, the guy coming over from Kuala Lumpur via Perth. He emailed me, as I gather you know, spilled the beans, told me everything. He's very proud of himself, thinks he's very clever. Dan, I swear, when you guys split into 2, he got the dumb half. I was beginning to think that too. He hasn't grown 1 iota as an individual, doggedly sticking to his stupidity. He's practically daring me to disagree with him. I will suffer foolishness, believe me. I will, but I won't suffer those who are proud of it. So what do we do about him? Okay, here's my plan. Listen carefully, take notes, and don't fuck it up. 9:21 a.m. I'm opening Outlook on the computer in the studio, expecting an email from D1. Sure enough, one is waiting in my inbox. He's sounding shriller and less pleasant every time. Dear D2, I am at the house in Wanneroo. I was expecting to find a list of instructions, but it seems you haven't gotten around to it. Can you attend to that soon, please? Also, the ring. I need the ring printed over. Please reply or call me on Skype. I assume you will honor the deal we made. I'm sure I don't have to remind you that it is the only logical outcome, D1. I pen the following reply. Hey, D1. I've had a few hiccups along the way, namely another accident. I fainted again and injured myself badly. Anyway, I'm better now, so everything can proceed to plan. Let's finalize everything this afternoon, shall we? Say 2 p.m. my time, 11 a.m. your time? It'll take me that long to organize the notes. There's a lot to tell you, so as to make a smooth transition. Almost at the end. I'm actually feeling a sense of relief. I'll call you on Skype, D2. 10:42 a.m. Justine is sitting cross-legged on the dining room chair, eating a piece of toast and staring into middle distance. I'm making coffee, using the plunger. I have a sense of déjà vu all over again, to quote Yogi Berra. It doesn't seem all that long ago that she was first sitting here in the same seat, eating toast, crumbs and butter on her cheek. And that's almost certainly because it wasn't that long ago. Our relationship might have started to resemble a Brazilian soap opera, but it has been nothing if not brief. I've reflected before just how much drama we've managed to pack into a few short weeks. In my case, the last few days have, in themselves, seen more than the previous year, or perhaps decade. The lounge looks empty without the rug, Justine says almost to herself. I find this an odd statement, given that she's not even facing the living room. Abruptly she turns to me. All that stuff really did happen last night, didn't it? I mean, you died, and then you came into the room and rolled yourself into the rug. And then we carried you down to the studio, then you and your uncle, the guy I used to call Carl, made the body disappear. That's a fair summary, isn't it? Yes, that's about right. You know, it's hard to believe any of it happened. Yet here you are. Here I am. I told you what Ian did to me, didn't I? Not in so many words, but yes. How do you feel? Sore, she says. I've already called in sick. I'm taking the week off. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking of quitting. I don't know what to do. I wonder whether to broach the subject of taking her to a clinic, but think the better of it. Can I have another toast? I realize I didn't eat dinner. Coming right up. I pop some more bread into the toaster and bring her a mug of coffee to the table. I definitely wouldn't trust the whole Dan died but he's back memory if you weren't all reversed this morning. Is it that obvious? Well, it is to me. I suppose that's why the jeans and the suits in your cupboard are all back to front. Uh-huh. God, This is all making some sort of twisted sense now. That's what your uncle was talking about when he said he didn't want to have to come over here from Brazil. Yes, he had heart surgery recently. He printed himself from Switzerland, and I gather it didn't suit his heart. It must be the swapping sides thing. Then there's the whole business of Frank's funeral. He died, just as you did last night. Yes, I printed a backup of Frank. He left a trail of instructions for me to follow. And he printed a backup of you last night. Yep, now you're getting it. Wow. We sit in silence for a few moments. I'm not sure if I should say anything. So, do you have, like, all the memories of the other guy? Do you remember us? Of course I do, silly, I reply, laughing. Why is that silly? For all I know, you're just a facsimile, a clone. My God, I can't even believe I'm having this conversation. Sorry, you're right. It isn't silly at all. Okay, here's the deal. My backup was made only 7 hours or so before I died, so I remember everything except what happened in those missing 7 hours. As far as my memory is concerned, I walked into the booth yesterday morning, just after I came from work. That was just after you gave me that massive bollocking, and just after Ian fired me. I walked in at some time in the morning and walked out at night time, to find you in the lounge room, holding my former self. Justine thinks about this for a moment before asking, So how does the printing work? God knows, and I imagine Frank knows. Quantum physics, string theory, multiple universes, stuff like that. Frank is a physicist. What would you like on your toast? Vegemite, thanks. So why do you come out back to front? Don't know. I was hoping Frank would explain it to me one day. All I know is that you swap every time you do it. Do you feel any different? Not really. You notice small things after a few minutes. But you don't feel like a different person. It's seamless. Here's your toast. Ta. She takes a bite, then a sip of her coffee. She puts down the mug and says, Can we start over, but this time be absolutely honest with each other? I'd love nothing more. Good, I'll start. I was a hooker at uni, and your coffee sucks. I had a feeling it did. Can I have a cup of tea instead? Done. Now, tell me about your wife. Well, she's in Perth. Are you at least separated? Yes, as it happens, she left me, or rather, she left the other guy. The other guy being the one on assignment in Malaysia. I call him D1. Let me get this straight. You made an extra copy of yourself. Pretty dumb, huh? Justine looks up and crosses her eyes. I'll say, whatever did you do that for? I wanted to come to Melbourne, but I was reluctant to erase myself. Guess I thought it was the same as dying. I was also scared of losing whatever it was I had. The kettle is just boiled again, and I'm pouring water into 2 mugs with tea bags. Can't imagine why you thought that. It was a hurdle I had to overcome initially. You mean to say it wouldn't bother you? To use your uncle's machines? From what I've seen, no. You've just done it. What, twice? Frank seems to have been at it for ages. Doesn't seem like a big deal. And you're not troubled by the philosophical aspects, life, death, continuity? You can ponder things too deeply, don't you think? I suppose, I say, smiling. Okay, next question. When you were with me, were you cheating on your wife, yes or no? Yes, I say immediately. Can't say I'm happy to hear that. Well, I'm not saying I have a defense, counsellor. I move to the table with the 2 cups of tea. But there is a context, and it serves at least as a plea in mitigation. Okay, let's hear it then. Well, we first kissed before I found out about the separation. So that's the part when I was cheating. But everything else was after I'd found out that Kylie, that's my wife, had already formally left me, or at least had left D1. It seems she's been living with another man for almost the whole time that I or we have been away. Who is this guy she's now shacked up with? He's supposed to be my best friend. That's a title he's given himself, anyway. God knows how he ever wormed his way into my life. He's a total doofus. You met him, Brad. Bradley? Oh, my God! I see what you mean. I have a so-called friend like that. But tell me, and be honest now, are you jealous at all that he and your wife are together? Not in the slightest. They're made for each other. I don't know how or why I ended up with Kylie. It was a mistake from day one. By the way, she's the girl who didn't like Frank and vice versa. I figured. So why stay with her all these years? Loyalty? I don't know. It's that hamster wheel we talked about. I was trying to live someone else's life, I suppose. It wasn't until I came over here, until I reprinted myself, that I realized what life was all about. And what is it all about? Being true to yourself. I hear people say that all the time. They have no idea what it actually means. It means not lying to yourself, or rather, not trying to lie to yourself, because I don't imagine you can ever really truly believe your own lies. A part of you will always know the truth. I guess I've tried for years to be someone I'm not, in one way or another. She finishes her toast and takes a sip of her tea. Much better, she says. Next question, then. Don't I get a turn? Another time. Would you take Kylie back? Never in a million years. Even D1 wouldn't. Okay, then, final question for now. What was the deal between you and this D1 character? Well, we created a copy, me, but we didn't erase the original, D1. I walked out of the booth here, he walked out of the booth in Perth. Shortly afterwards, he got sent to Kuala Lumpur. And shortly after that, Brad moved in with Kylie. No, I mean, what were you meant to do for each other? The copy was supposed to support the original. Basically, I was meant to earn money so that Kylie could spend it. That sounds plain loopy. Pretty much. Why ever did you agree to such a plan? Ever made a dumb decision in your life? Fair enough. So what happens now that the whole Kylie thing has fallen away? Strangely enough, D1 wants to come here. What? And share one roof, the two of you? Nope, he expects me to erase myself. Pfft, what a gall! The more I hear about your other self, the less I like him. Ditto, actually. How would that work anyway? Isn't the other guy afraid of printing himself? He's planning to come by plane. Oh, for God's sake, he's nothing but clumsy Danny Kaye. You're not going to let him do that, are you? No, funny you should mention, but Frank and I have a plan. He's meant to fly in on Friday, but our plan actually swings into action this afternoon. Seriously? Uh-huh. Can I watch? Only if you keep out of sight of the camera. Easy. I assume you're going to erase the guy. You don't seem troubled by that prospect? Why should I be? I just saw you die. Then I saw you resurrected. Then I saw you get rid of your own corpse. You're erasing the clumsy Danny Kaye version of yourself. That's nothing. While you're at it, can you erase that bastard Ian McRae? Frank has an even better idea for Ian, but one step at a time, eh?